Hi, this is Joe Chambers. Welcome to Musicians Hall of Fame Backstage. Today's guest is Joe Bonamassa. This is part one of a three-part interview we did with Joe. Joe talks about a lot of things, being brought up in a music store and just having a talent from the very beginning. And his father realized that and was willing to take 2 weeks' salary, the equivalent of his mother and father's 2 weeks' salary, and buy him a 1972 Candy Apple Red Fender Stratocaster. But the key was he had to hide it from his mother for a while. She didn't blow her top, but she wasn't thrilled about it when she found out. Hope you enjoy it. If you do, be sure to hit like, subscribe, and the notification bell so you don't miss any of our new content. Once again, Joe Bonamassa. Welcome to Musicians Hall of Fame. Today's guest is the fantastic Joe Bonamassa. Joe, thank you again so much for doing this, man.
I'm honored to be here. Thanks for having me. I love this museum. It's like one of my favorite places to come and geek out. There's so much cool stuff to see.
Okay, we're done. Thank you.
Yeah, right.
I appreciate it a lot. And Maestro, I had a Maestro pedal.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't seen that logo in years, but it was a phase shifter.
Right.
And it was great. I don't know. It was just big, but it was cool. You know, sounded like a Leslie almost.
That's right. If it's a 3-button Maestro phaser, if you couldn't afford a Leslie or didn't want to, more importantly, didn't want to lug one around,
right? Especially
for guitar, that was the one to have because it was like close enough is good enough for what we're doing.
Yep. So we got kind of a similar background. Your dad had a music store, right?
Yeah, I grew up in a music store when I was a kid. My dad had 2 different shops. He had a shop, retired from that for about 10 years, then started another shop, retired from that, and now he's happily retired out of the music business. And that's where the collector bug hit me, was being around old guitars my whole life. And a lot of people think that, since people started to recognize my name, that I was like, all I did was just go on eBay and buy guitars. It was really, I didn't do any of that. I've always had them, and even when I was living on peanut butter and jelly and ramen noodles, I always had a rosewood slab Strat laying around or a gold top Les Paul. Because as we know, musicians are willing to spend every dollar that they have on an instrument when they can't afford things like rent, water, electricity,
medical
care, all the above. And so my thing was, I was always interested in the history of where the actual instrument came from.
Mm-hmm.
And then secondly, who played it? If it's a gold top with a stop bar and it wraps around, it's like, oh, I used to see Bloomfield play one of those, in the magazines. And, if it was a Telecaster, it would have been, oh, that's the same one that Danny Gatton played or Roy Buchanan. And so we always get this name association with the instruments. But more importantly, somebody purchased this thing in 1952, kept it their whole lives, and then finally decides to sell it. I mean, we've done this our whole lives, is find stuff under the beds. So that was really, for me, it's the hunt, not so much the tangible item. It's the story behind it.
Yeah, a lot of times, you couldn't wait to buy a guitar. You get it, and then, okay, what's next?
What's next, right? And sometimes it was like when we would go to the guitar shows, I would help my dad at the guitar shows. It would we'd buy 30 guitars a day, and that's when it really kicks in overdrive. Or 45 pieces over 2 days. You're like, wow, I just bought 45 guitars. Well, obviously they were for the shop, not for me. But it's still the thrill. It's like the latches click, and it either revealed, and it's like we've all had them where the case opens, and like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing ever, and then oh my God, this is terrible, And it's like it's just that, I guess that's that shot of dopamine that you get, it's exciting.
I remember opening up a Robin Egg Blues, what I called it, Fender Mustang, and when I opened it up, it was like, you know how new cars have a, it had that Fender smell.
Right.
I don't even, you know, unfortunately for the kids, once I opened up my guitar shop starting in '85, they were using an animal-based glue. That was not a good smell.
Right.
Matter of fact, they had to recall all those cases.
Right.
But luckily, when I grew up, they had that new car smell, and it was, and as soon as I smelled it, I was back in my bedroom, you know, playing guitar, sitting on the bed again, you know.
Well, you know, I mean, you know, I'm a pretty infamous collector at this point, and you know, it's like, well, what am I doing? You know, and you know, and conversely, if you're a guitar dealer, it's like you're selling nostalgia. You know, it's like, you know, you have to have had, you know, instances in your store where, you know, a wealthy guy comes in and goes, oh my God, and you think they're looking at the most expensive guitar in the shop, and it's the silver tone with the amp and case, and they go, I had one of those when I was 8. I'll take it.
Yeah.
You know, and or like, you know, it's like when I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, I always wanted a Hofner bass or a Gretsch Country Gentleman or, you know, a Ludwig drum kit. And one of the things I've seen change over the last, I'd say 5 or 10 years is I'm about to be 44 years old. When this airs, I will definitely be 44 years old. And the thing is, my generation, I was always an old soul when I was a kid. So I was looking backwards. I was looking to the B.B. Kings and the Hendrix and the British blues invasion, you know, Cream, Jeff Beck, Zeppelin, and ZZ Top. I was really a child of the 50s and 60s, but born in 1977. What I find now is like people my age are looking back to being a child of the 80s, where, you know, in the guitar sense, they're like, man, I really want to get a striped Charvel like Eddie Van Halen
or
played.
or
a Kramer, or a BC Rich or something like that, that was associated with those artists going for, you know, when they were young. And the thing is, now you're seeing Charvels go for, how much is that? We used to throw those out.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
my father wouldn't even take them in trade. You know, but now they're $4,000 or $5,000, $6,000 for a pointy head Charvel with stripes on it. You're like, and at first you go, well, don't you want a Buddy Holly Strat? Then you realize they don't know who Buddy Holly is,
Right.
and it's a big thing. You know,
it's the same thing with the vintage car market. You know, all the guys that were brought up in the '50s, you know, 20 years ago wanted a '50s Corvette or whatever it was, and then they started going down. And you're going to start seeing the ones that people kind of turn their nose up at, the '70s, are gradually going up, you know, because it's the same what you're talking about.
Yeah. And by the way, pro tip, I believe it's 1976 is the cutoff. You need the catalytic converter. They won't let you take it off, especially in California.
Yeah.
You got to get smogged.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's like you are selling nostalgia. Like if someone's first car is a '78 Eldorado, they want a '78 Eldorado.
Right.
They don't want a '59 Fleetwood. You know,
Right.
and it's a collectibles are like anything else. It's cyclic and it's only worth what somebody's willing to pay for it.
Right.
It's really market price.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. My dad took me over to. I was born in Georgia on the river, Columbus. But between Columbus, Georgia, and Phoenix City, Alabama, and my dad knew. My dad, I was brought up in a grocery store. That started my love of candy. Where
Right.
yours was guitars, and we went over, and there was what they called a Cortez. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it was a quart,
Right.
model of a quart. You know,
Right.
Of course, it had a mirrored pick guard,
Yeah.
and that's all that matters. You know, it
Yeah.
was flashy, and you know, and it was like trying to play a railroad tie. It was the strings were incredibly high off. It hurt, and once I got it, that was all I was going to get for a long time because my parents didn't know. That's a guitar. It doesn't matter. You know, they don't.
Right.
So many parents don't realize, and that's why when I had my shops, I would never sell a guitar that a kid couldn't play. I didn't want them to go through the same thing that
Right.
I and so many other people did with those cheesy guitars.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like there's nothing that discourages a kid more, especially early on when you don't have the muscle memory
Right.
and you don't have the strength in your hands, and especially in your fingers to work independently of one another. Like everybody can do this.
Yeah.
It's just getting to do that. And if the guitar plays like a truck, it's chances are it's going to be 2 lessons, and it'll
Under
sit
the bed in
under
the
the
closet.
bed. Yeah.
Or if they break a string, the parents will get mad at them, and they don't realize,
Hmm.
you know. And that was the thing that people that started buying these guitars in the big chain stores in the '90s, they could get a guitar for $99,
Hmm.
and they were putting Fender's name on it in some way or another. But the kids, they had nobody there to guide them, nobody to teach them lessons.
Right.
We taught thousands of kids. We taught Miley Cyrus
Right.
how to play guitar. I
Right.
mean, you know, so that's how you sold the second guitar. If you want to look at it just from a sales point of view,
Right.
if they don't learn how to play, they won't ever come back.
Yeah, and you know, your first guitar leads to it's a gateway. I don't want to say the word gateway drug, but it kind of is.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, it's like you got one. It's like, okay, that's how many are you? And because the thing is, it's not like there's only a few people that I know that are piano collectors, and you know,
I
it's
never
like,
thought of it.
you know, and Ben Folds, I interviewed him for my show, and I mentioned, I said, you know, I can only name on one hand and one finger how many piano collectors I know, and it's you, because when he had RCA Studio B or Studio A, the big room there,
Havilena or whatever.
and it's huge. But I remember being in there when he operated it. I'm like, why is there 9 grand pianos in here and like 16 uprights, and there was still plenty of room to set up our band and all our production cases. I'm like, you really have to have space. Same thing with cars. Same thing with, you know, anything that large items. Guitars, my God, I could Tetris that stuff into a small. I get 50 into a closet, you know, and then it's, of course when you open it, the stuff falls out, but at least they're being stored neatly, you know.
You know, like I told you, I could cram 120 in the back of my van,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like a Plymouth Voyager, you know.
Right? Yeah,
You still have your 70, was it 72 Strat?
I do. It fell into disrepair. I hid it from my mother. It was $275, which was all the money to my parents. Like, this is why I still don't pay $300 for a guitar, because $300 net after tax was basically what my mom and dad made per person. So I never look at it like a $300 guitar as a cheap guitar, because that represented 40 hours of hard work by both parents.
Right.
And I remember one day my dad came home and he bought it from Big Apple Music in New Hartford, New York, and it was a candy apple red 72 Strat, missing a knob, an original case, but it was beat up and cool. And he goes, "I got you this, don't tell your mother." So we had to figure out, because she was going to see the money was missing. It wasn't like we had money. It would be missing. And she's like, "Don't tell your mother." Okay. So I hid the guitar for at least the first month where she would least expect it. It was under her side of the bed.
How did you practice?
Well, I had a gap between 2:45 and 4:30 when my mom, I had another guitar, and my mom would get home at 4:30, and I always would play, and I would check my watch, and then if you hear the thud of the door, then it was like click, click, boom. You know, we didn't live in a big house, and I would stop, you know, sticking under the bed. And I think finally my father told her, and she was not thrilled, but at that point, I was like 11 years old, and I just started playing out professionally, and I agreed to pay it off. So I paid $275, and then one day I got this just stupid idea, but we have all done this as a kid. I took the edge of a capo because the paint was peeling off it, and I wanted a guitar that looked like Lowell George's, so I wanted a natural, so I just shaved off all that lovely candy apple red, and I still have it. It now has a rosewood neck on it. It has some of the original pickups, and I found the original pick guard, the original bridge, you know, but it just got torn apart for 25 years, and then a friend of mine put it back together. So I still have it.
But you got it.
It's the gist of it. It's not the original guitar.
So you're 12 years old, and you're playing with B.B. King. How in the heck does this happen?
I was making a little bit of a name for myself in upstate New York. This is before the internet, you know, so there was always like word spread in different ways. It was like really was word of mouth. And I'd done a couple of pop-in shows, or not shows, like guest stars, you know, like a guy named Tom Townsley, who played harmonica and hosted a blues show, would have me come in on the blues show, and I would play too many notes, but he would play harmonica with me. And then he'd have me sitting with his band. And then there was a guy named Midnight Mike. His name was Mike Grimaldi. Mike's Irish boy. And that's a typical upstate New York Italian name. And he would go by Midnight Mike, and I believe it was the Blue Tones or whatever. And he would have me sit in. Next thing you know, I would start drawing a crowd, knowing that I would be sitting in, and people would, then the newspaper would they would kind of pick up on it. And then I got booked to open up for B.B. King a couple months after I did my first headline show. And it was just because the promoter knew in that region I was drawing a crowd. We got booked at the Lilac Festival in Rochester. And, you know, we all know Mr. King and how he used to roll. Like, B.B. would come in kind of at the end, you know, and his bus would roll in about a half hour before his gig, and then he'd play, and then he'd meet people. But in this particular day, he flew in, he was there early, and his tour manager, Sherman, told him, hey, you know, you have a 12-year-old kid opening up for you. Okay, well, this I got to see. So the next thing you know, I'm halfway through the show, 45 minutes or whatever, and I looked to my right, or I'd actually looked to my left. Yeah, because I'm standing there. I was on stage. I looked to my left, and there he was. Big red sparkle coat, big sunglasses, and it's B.B. King. Same guy as live at the Regal. I kind of froze, and I was like, oh my God, look at that. And he invited me to his dressing room after my show. And he's like, son, how did you get into the blues? And I said, well, after my first communion, I got some money. Here's another thing I didn't realize. You get some money after your first communion, at least where I came from. And I went to Camelot Records, and I bought Steve Morris, The Introduction, and B.B. King Live at the Regal. So I was well into B.B. at that point. And I told him the story, and he just started laughing. And he's like, well, he goes, I really like what you do. And he kind of stayed in touch through his manager, and he invited me on a tour. We would do shows with him when he would come through the region, you know, like upstate New York,
Yeah.
or you know, East Coast, wherever we could travel to, because we were in the family car, and so was the band. And it was just that kind of organic friendship that lasted 26 years. You know?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back.